What's up, folks? This is Living the Lines of 5-0 Media Production. Today we got in here with us songwriter and musician Ryan Rooster Lee.
Yes, sir.
What's up, man?
How's it going, bro?
First off, how'd you get the name Rooster? I don't know that I've ever asked you that.
It's kind of a long and short story, but
Ain't it always?
it depends on who's asking me where I'm at and
Right.
different things. And I've been asked in different interviews. I've said some crazy stuff
Yeah.
just to
I
add
I
to it.
totally feel you, man.
But the honest answer really is I grew up in Houston, Texas as a kid on skateboard. Kurt Cobain was my idol. I grew up kind of long hair shaved underneath and skateboard type stuff and city kid and rock star, all the grunge movement in the 90s. I grew up, I was a little teenager punk kid in the 90s. So, and then things kind of was going south. I grew up in Houston, Texas. And then my grandfather, he raised me some in Houston, Texas. He was down there with me. He had to move to West Tennessee where he originally grew up because of his childhood, and his mother, which is my great grandmother, got sick. And so I kind of followed him up there, and he raised me up there. And whenever I went there, then it was all country life. And, it was country kids and mullets and Billy Ray Cyrus, Garth Brooks, and all that kind of stuff, and big belt buckles and the Western shirts and the cowboy boots. And I kind of didn't really fit in with that. And I kind of introduced them to the grunge movement and Alice in Chains and different things like that. And like they'd never heard of no Alice in Chains, Rooster, and all that stuff like
Right.
that. And that's not necessarily how I got my name, and they influenced me on like some Garth and different things like that. But I wound up pretty much fighting almost half my class just because, we kind of butted heads. But in the long run, I become a country boy, raised, farm, fishing, three-wheelers and things like that. But, being back home in a small town in West Tennessee, y'all been out there before in Sharon, Tennessee area. And it's almost like a jail or anything where once people start calling you a name, and some of the elders, my grandfather, like I said, my grandfather raised me, but a lot of his friends and different people like that, they all, you had almost like the older crowd and the younger generation, but everybody knows everybody, and most all everybody's nearly related in some distant way or another. And so, but the older people started calling me Rooster because I had the red hair. They called me Rooster fast and red hair and skateboard and everything like that, and then played basketball, and I was real fast. I would steal the ball real quick. I couldn't shoot the greatest and different thing like that.
You said they called me Rooster.
But it was Rooster fast, and they dropped the fast part. But
That's incredible, man.
once they started calling me Rooster, it was game over. I couldn't do nothing about it. Then my friends and closer buddies started calling me Rooster. I didn't have no choice.
We've been knowing each other for well over a decade now, man. And we kind of met in a pretty typical Music City way. We found ourselves all hanging around a house full of musicians, at least everybody that was hanging around in this time period at this particular place, at least played a little bit.
Yeah.
And they were putting on house parties, man, and they had bands playing over there and mud wrestling, and it was just a really crazy summer. It didn't really last much up into the fall, but it kind of exposed me to a different way. And like I ended up in a band directly from hanging out over there. So much stuff, and here we are 13 or 14 years later, So you were originally born in Houston, Texas?
Yeah.
And how old were you when you ended up in Sharon, Tennessee?
I believe the 5th grade.
Okay.
Yeah. I believe the 5th grade, and then it was a K through 12. I went to school there till the 12th grade.
So you showed up fresh going into junior high or so, and listening to Nirvana and Alice in Chains and all that. And was it really that much of a culture shock for you from where you had been?
Yeah,
the
like I
first part of your
said,
life?
I had to fight half my class just, I wasn't
Just because you
doing
like
that
grunge
stuff.
music?
Yeah, and then I grew up, but I didn't even get into music till I was.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. How did you kind of get into playing and stuff? Because I remember one time you told me you learned D, C, and G, and then you wrote about 300 songs.
Yeah. least, if it wasn't 600 or 700 just in that key.
Yeah.
But how I got into music, so I mean, pretty much to say where we left off was I went there till the 12th grade. I actually went to Greenfield and graduated the 12th grade, but between the 12th grade and uh, by the time and like I said, my grandfather raised me, and then by the time I got out of school, I was graduated around 17, almost 18 years old. Went into work and everything. My grandfather was in perfect health, and then he come down with cancer and was pretty much gone within 6 months of us finding out.
Right.
And at that time, I did move back to Houston, Texas, and I just met my dad and some brothers on that side. My mother and my brother, who was in my life all my life, was there as well. So, and I just went back down there. So the big emotional shock of everything going fine and making good money and welding and different things like that, to having to walk away from a job, start my life all over in a big city, coming from the factory. I grew up in Houston, but going back into it as an adult was almost a challenge. And then, but how I got into music is my grandfather passed. I was on a real low level. Didn't meet my dad till I was like 19 and everything like that. So that was a big shock. And I stayed there a couple years. Things kind of didn't work out, and I just was never uncomfortable. I mean, never comfortable. So I was uncomfortable. I moved back to West Tennessee. Actually, I came home to visit after being gone for about a year and a half or two, and was around all my buddies and different things. I was like, man, I got to come home. Like, that was my family, and that was kind of my life. So eventually I did come home, and then naturally I just started writing poems. I'm a storyteller, as you know,
Right.
y'all have known me for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes I can just ramble on. But naturally, even when I was a kid in the younger 90s, I liked I come along, and it's crazy to think, to look back along a lot of the rap movement. I liked a lot of rap too, and Vanilla Ice is not something to brag about now, but back in the days, like
Hey,
his
that was
biggest things.
influential at the
Yeah.
time. Yeah, man.
But even MC Hammer and Dr. Dre and some of the NWA, all the way up to Tupac and all that stuff.
Right.
I was really influenced by Tupac as far as lyrics and things, and then rock too, as long as like the genre and
So you were
things
surrounded,
like
like you
that.
had all this musical stuff that you were interested in, but you spent a long time with, like, there was nobody in your family that was a musician per se, or there's no
My
instruments laying around. It was mostly just you as a music consumer before you really got into like
Yeah,
playing your own stuff.
it was mostly me, and then I had a little karaoke set thing, and I would sing and distorted microphone when you turn
Right.
it up halfway and just junk like that. And I would make up my own little things. But my great grandmother, who I did live with, she was a member of the church for 60 years. She passed away at 86. She started playing organ for the church at 16, and I was there when she was 86, and they gave her mother of the church, and I didn't. I would turn on her old organ. Actually, now I got it come full circle. I got it in my house a couple years ago, but I'd lost track of it for 20
Right.
years. But I would go start it up and bang on it. It would be loud, and bang on it. My grandmother come running in there. I'd just take off running, go hide in my room. But no, man. Now I look at that bench all the time because it's my TV sits on it,
Mhm.
and so I think of her all the time and think of it. And I used to sit on that bench with her. And I got a whole studio in my house. And I don't play the keys and organ and things. I play strictly guitar and mess with some other stuff.
Right.
But no, I wasn't. She played church music and different things, and that wasn't. And I did go to church. She got me into church and things like that too. But and I would listen, but I wasn't influenced by the church music as far as me wanting to learn how to play that or any type of music.
Right.
Lyrics has always been my thing, and it still kind of is. And then, so what got me into it, I started writing like long poems just as before bed and things because I had so much in my mind and
Right.
a lot, very depressed and different things like that. So a lot of dark stuff, and maybe that's why I gravitated towards dark music as well. But, and then eventually, got into shortening it. And I don't even read books, but I was interested in like songwriting things. I don't remember how I come across it. I still got a couple of my first songwriting books,
Right.
and eventually that become a 360. And so I started pretty much learning to take my stories and taper it down. Then I started learning kind of verse, chorus, melody,
Were you playing
bridges
guitar
and
at this
stuff.
time, or was this strictly just you
Uh, at
writing?
that time when my brother knew I was getting into guitar, his dad bought him a guitar and an amp, and it's still what I got today. One of them is a Telecaster. I don't even play it much because I've invested a lot of money into it and changed it up a lot.
Right.
Um, but I would pick it up, and like I say, and that's kind of, and Martin is a small town, whereas a college town, and so I eventually later on, after I started kind of messing with music, and I still couldn't play, but I had melodies, and I would have songs that I just started singing. And my buddies, I'd get kind of hammered drunk and at parties and different things, and I'd be like, and I had a couple songs, and they was like, man, and so they would start say it, and they would get me to sing, and I was like, man, this kind of catching on to different things. I did have a buddy who was at that time was real big into music, and he had a band, and I was more influenced by my buddy Eric Brewer, who I still play with to this day.
Right.
Actually, I was influenced by a lot of rock music and things like that, but and then he started actually doing it. He loves rock music and grunge and everything. But I would go to his shows, and they was packing places, and I still think to this day they could have really went on and done some big things, but they was young and early 20s, and
Yeah, the
I think
band dynamic's real tough, man.
well at that time, a lot of people, you get girlfriends, you wind up getting wives or kids, and,
Yeah.
and different things. People split up or button heads, or you
You
know
just start to learn, and maybe it's not the lifestyle for you. For some people, take to it
yeah.
like a fish to water, and some people, it's just not for them.
Being band and music and different things, you really got to be dedicated and go for the long haul. And there's
You have to love it, because if you don't love it, you'll
yeah,
never stick it out.
it's come full circle where I have made a living, done it for 17 years, and there for a long time I was playing over 100 gigs a year, and that was my main deal. Having a kid really
Right.
changed that.
So
But
when did you start like really getting into guitar playing? And
so when I would get into when I had a buddy, I moved around a little bit, and I started living next door to a guy who used to play music. He was a little older than me, and at that time I was mid 20s, and he was about 30 or more, and uh, we kind of influenced each other. I had an old guitar, and I wound up getting an acoustic, and he came over. We just kind of getting to know each other. He came over, and I was banging on this acoustic trying to learn
yeah,
chords. And he was like, "Let me show you a couple things." That's kind of what he showed me, some D, C, and G and
yeah,
stuff.
man.
And then I inspired him to go get a drum set
Once you get
eventually.
over that first little bit and you can
Yeah,
actually start creating, it becomes so addictive, man.
yeah.
What were some of the first places that you were kind of playing? Just like parties, or like when
Uh,
was you starting to get into playing the bars and stuff?
so and then back to that. So I started picking up guitar, and then we started forming a band. Some other guys, I would recruit some people that went to Martin or different things like that. They would come in, play for 2 or 3 months, and I'd have this song, and we about the time we get something going, they'd leave, and I'd pick up the guitar and learn a little bit more.
Right.
Eventually, Facebook started coming out and doing things. I found a band. They was looking for a singer, and I wasn't a great singer then. Probably not as great now, but I've gotten a lot better. But I went in, kind of auditioned for them. They loved it, and then I started just jamming in the basement. And eventually, they kind of all it was a they kind of split up again.
Right.
And bands are fun and everything, but there's a lot of dynamics to it.
It's hard to find the right,
Yeah.
you know.
Eventually, I found some older guys, and I was later 20s before I actually really had the guitar, could start playing and singing and playing with the band, but I was still very limited.
Right.
And eventually, so my first gigs was like at just a backyard party type thing, and I'll never forget my first gig. It was the biggest thing. I was so nervous and things,
It's
and I've done over probably 1,000 and something shows now, and I still sometimes get nervous
it
and
don't get much
anxiety.
easier, man. It
Anxiety.
don't, no matter how many times you do it, that first little bit, like when you're like, okay, we're really about to do this, because it seems crazy, and I think getting up on stage with just you and a guitar, and especially your own songs, is like the most vulnerable you could ever be.
Yeah, no doubt.
So you were recording down there in Jackson before you came to Nashville for the first time, right?
Um, I I played a lot. I had a full time job doing. I was a welder for full time, and I got sick of punching a clock, working paycheck to paycheck,
Right.
dealing with coworkers, dealing with bosses, doing the same repetitive thing every day for. At that time, by this time, it was 12, 15 years I've been in factories and things.
Right.
And I did have, like you say, man, I had a couple hundred songs, had a lot of scrap work and uh, 10 or 12 that I was kind of proud of that I would play in front of people and different things. And I'd learn, about that many covers. So I had about 20, 30 songs. Eventually I started getting gigs at local places that I knew the owners and different things, playing for free and getting in there and getting over my fear. And that led me to start playing. And then, so I still kept that job and played on the weekends, and they would maybe give me free beer or a tab comp or different thing like
Right.
that. And I got to where I would charge other venues or things for the distance. And uh,
Hey, just cutting your teeth, man,
yeah,
finding your voice and
yeah.
figuring out who you are.
Eventually, I started playing Jackson, Memphis, and Nashville on the round, on the regular, and then places like Kentucky Lake, where I still play. A lot of the places I play now is where I got in the circle. And I've been playing a lot of them for 10, 12 years now.
Yeah.
Those were the first ones I booked in the beginning of the year, and then I branched out to places. But yeah, it's kind of what led to that. And after a couple years, and I started charging, and I started learning a lot more cover songs and trying to work on my sets and building a band. I built a band back home. Eventually, did start recording in Jackson, and in Jackson, I started I started this album, uh, and this was about uh, 2008 or so. 2000. Well, I didn't even start playing and doing the band type stuff between 2008 to about 2010,
Right.
11. Between 10 and 12 is whenever I was working in the factory. Those 2 years that I
Hmm.
was kind of overlapping each other. I would work 40 to 60 hours in the factory and then play, on the road or anywhere that would let me play on the weekends. Um, Eventually, I started making almost what I was making, and I was only having to work 2 days a week. And at that time, my idea too was to try. I spent so much money in the bar between the time I was 18 to almost 30 that
Right.
I was. And my goal then was to get all the money back from the bars that I
Yeah, I
spent.
just got to break even again.
I think I got about 5 more years before I do that. But
Whenever I first met you, it was probably 2013, 2012, 2013 or so, and you had already made a record and you had spent some time with W.S. Holland. Were you recording with
yeah,
W.S. Holland, or was that just part of your documentary thing that you
I
were
started
doing?
recording. I found a guy on, maybe it was Facebook and stuff. I found a guy, and it was uh, Jonathan King out of Medina, which is just this, just on the outskirts of Jackson.
Right.
And the crazy thing is, and I was working on my album. It was going to be called Chase Your Dreams. I had like 10 songs, and that I was willing to spend money on recording. And as we all know, recording's expensive and stuff. But so I about a week before that, I was trying to really get prepared at working every day on these songs, tightening up before I went in the studio. I met Jonathan King. Well, the the night before I met Jonathan King, it was just crazy. I had a crazy dream, couldn't hardly sleep, and I didn't even know who W.S. Holland really was. I knew Johnny Cash. He played
Right.
with Johnny
For
Cash.
those who don't know, W.S. Holland, he played for Carl Perkins. He played drums and he played on the Blue Suede Shoes session.
Yeah,
And he
20
was
years.
also part of the $1 Million Quartet session, which was a day to where it just happenstance that Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, Johnny Cash, and Elvis were all standing around a piano
Yeah,
together singing old gospel songs.
yeah.
And WS was on the session for that. And he also went on to play for Johnny Cash's road band for years and years and years too.
His nickname's W.S. Fluke Calling, is because it's a fluke how he got in the business. And slightly go back to what I was saying is I had a dream and everybody has their idea of how they're going to start, how they got somewhere in life with music. And no artist really is exactly the same. But my idea was how could I get these songs to life or become a pro musician at the time, and my idea was if I started this documentary, well, I had a dream that I started interviewing like big time people, you
Right.
know, like Garth Brooks or anybody or my idols and thing. I don't
Right.
remember exactly what this dream consisted of, but that's kind of what it was. So how could I start interviewing these people? And I always knew, and I got a personality. I can kind of get along with almost anybody at any time.
Right.
And so I knew that if I could get in there and interview these guys, that I could become buddies with them. Or if I could, that was going to be my way in.
Yeah. If I can just get close, they're
If I
going to
can,
realize I'm charming, and they're going
yeah,
to
if
give me $1 million and take me on the road.
yeah, that was, you know, that was my
Well,
dream.
that is networking. I mean, that's the whole
Yeah.
what a lot of this is based off of. You know.
And so, and I told Jonathan King about this. Well, I was just going to go in and check a studio out and talk prices and talk what it would take and what I needed to do.
What was that kind of like? Was that the only studio around close there, or were there other options?
At
Or
that time, man, so I didn't even really know much about music, you know, or anything. I also step back a little bit is between that time where I was doing music and working in 2 years and different things that I spoke of, I also wound up getting music on the radio on the local station and stuff like that. So I had a couple. So that's what led me to the idea of, man. But I just we recorded these in the house studio. Somehow another radio guy that found out about it, and I invited him to come over. My buddy who was in my band recording them and working on the studio or the. You know how we had a home studio with drapes and
eggshell cartons and
everything,
mattresses leaned
a
up against the
drum
wall
room
or
and
an area.
amp room and things, and
Yeah.
it was just my buddy's 2 bedroom apartment turned into a studio.
That's the way they made that first Zach Bryan record.
Yeah,
They just Airbnb
that's
the
where
house.
a lot of records has been made, you know, too. But I just wanted the better quality, so you know, and that was just I don't honestly, you know, that was 2011 or so, and
Yeah.
it's been a while. But I met Jonathan King and I told him my dream and idea, and he was like, "Well, I got W.S. Holland coming in my studio, and he's going to do some stuff." And you know, he played with Carl Perkins, Johnny Cash for 60 years of his life.
Yeah.
I was like, "That's who I want to start with."
Right.
And within a week, well, he said he's coming in like, you know, so and so day, and I was like, "I'll be there." So he said, "Let me call him see if he's down for it," and he said, "Yeah." And I didn't even have the song Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash eventually was like my fourth or fifth song that I ever had make radio.
Right.
But at that time, I had these 10 songs. None of them had the song that I made my single that was Johnny Cash Tennessee Band. And whenever, between them only a couple days, that he said, I went home and didn't sleep probably like 3 days. I started just kind of writing whatever I could. And it's pretty much a G, C, and D song. And man, I went and I wrote a song, and the first part talks about being in the studio with W.S. Holland, playing my song with his, you know, felt like I was Johnny Cash playing my song
Right.
with his Tennessee band. You know, W.S. Holland was his band.
So he was actually playing it on your song, on your session with you?
No, he didn't. What we did is I went in and I wrote this song in a couple days, and I told Jonathan, I was like, "Man, I got this new song that I've just wrote. I want to record it so that we can play it when he comes in." And he was like, we'll do it the day he comes in. We'll record it for a couple hours. I went in, Jonathan kind of knocked it out. I played it for him. He knocked it out. And W.S. Holland walks in the door while we're kind of still working on it.
Right.
And he's like, "What are y'all working on?"
In
You know,
this back home studio, backdoor home studio
well,
setup.
his studio was actually a nice studio.
Okay.
It was in his barn, but it was more of a professional setup.
understand.
It was still,
Yeah.
and he's really built onto it to make it even better now. But you know, and a lot of people from West Tennessee has recorded out of there now. But and he was like, and W.S. Holland's a lovable man and stuff. And I was like, "Man, I wrote this song for you."
Yeah.
Like, I knew we was going to record this song and everything like that. Once you agreed to do this interview, he was like, "Well, play it. Let's hear it." And then, and man, he'd like play it again. He loved it and stuff. And he was like, "So what do you want to do?" And I was like, "Man, you know, I didn't even know, man, because I wanted to interview him. But where do I start? I had some ideas and questions, but once he was there, I was almost starstruck,
Right.
even though I kind of didn't know who he was. And then I did interview, like I say, when I didn't sleep for 3 or 4 days, like I was researching, I was doing my homework on him. And now almost, just like Mike Tyson says, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
And when he was there and everything, I was like just floorboarded. He went in there and did some stuff on the drums and stuff. You can find this on my YouTube. I did 3 interviews with him,
Okay.
and eventually, and it's very influential and stuff. It's educational, historical, influential, and history. And I've done about 15 interviews with lots of different people: Ronnie McDowell, Bill Anderson, several #1 songwriters, a guy all the way in uh, North Petaluma, California, named Lester Chambers. He was part of the Chambers Brothers. He played Woodstock 69, 99, toured the world. Beatles, Allison Cooper, Johnny Cash, all kinds of people. He was actually my second interview. I could go on about all those interviews and stuff, but uh,
You kind of have the same passion for all this stuff that I have. Like you're just interested in all angles of it.
yeah, yeah. I've always kind of been addicted to history, learning, education, everything, and I just kind of want to share that,
Right.
while I'm here on this earth, just to experience stuff I've wrote, experience live playing and interacting with the crowd, and experience getting the history and these some of these famous people or people that I've interviewed or different things. A lot of the younger generation don't have a clue who some of these people are,
Right.
and getting their word out with little platform
Yeah,
like
because
that.
you got to be pretty far down the rabbit hole to even care who the session drummer was on Blue Suede Shoes, or
Yeah.
or some of these songwriters and stuff. As just a general consumer, a lot of those people they're just not far enough into it to care or to know to care.
Well, the way the music is grasped now is it's just a whole different thing. Everything's digital, and if it don't pop up on your playlist on something you're streaming, you don't know.
Yeah, you got to dig for it.
And
You got to go
and
find it.
there's so much money getting dumped to the new artists and different things, and artists has done it in the last 10 years that they're not spending as much money, and some of these streaming outfits are not going to push some of these older artists like they will the newest artists because
Right.
it's all about money.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the worst business that any sane
If you want
person
to
could
make a lot of
possibly
money,
be
don't
in.
play music.
Yeah, I mean, you got to just have it in your blood and want it for every other reason other than that. So when I first met you, all this was kind of fresh. You had just made your album, or it was, you know, fairly
Yeah,
new.
yeah.
You had kind of been working on the documentary and doing the interviews and stuff. Was that the first time you moved to Nashville when me and you met the first time, or had you already lived here before?
That was the first time.
Yeah.
That wasn't the direct first place I went to. I
Right.
started trying to find roommates on Facebook and
Yeah,
different
kind of
things
tell me
like
about
that.
taking that leap to being like, all right, I'm going to go
Man,
to
that was a horrible
Nashville.
experience.
Yeah. It tends to play out like that for a lot of people.
So I was playing in Nashville quite a bit and started meeting some friends group and met Michael McGregor
Right.
and some other friends, and actually that's how that led to me getting to know you
Yeah.
and Michael and everybody is well, and even back then, it's, like you say, that's still a blur because it's so long ago. But
Yeah.
I think eventually I was trying to find places on Marketplace and different things like that, and it was hard to leave home, so I was still playing Memphis and Nashville and Jackson and everything, and home where it was cheaper living and stuff. Um, and I knew a couple people in Nashville, but to try to get my own place, I wasn't for sure if I wanted to take that leap, and I was trying to get a roommate and thought I'd live here for a year and see, and I moved to Murfreesboro. Lived with somebody I met off Facebook Marketplace for a couple months. That didn't work out. I met another guy in Gallatin. I lived with him a couple months, and that kind of went south. He had a radio station in his house and stuff. It started out as a good relationship and a good opportunity for me and him, and uh, eventually it didn't.
Yeah.
I'd done some stuff with Michael McGregor. I met him.
Record deal tonight.
Yeah, yeah. And I met him, started doing, played a gig or two around Nashville, and then he invited me then that's how me and you met, I believe,
Yeah.
to another friend's house in Greenbrier,
House
not
parties.
far
Yeah.
from where
We
I'm
got
at.
we met up at house parties where they had mud wrestling in front of the stage, and this whole little thing, man, it's been brewing for over a decade now. With our little bunch, we've all kind of I mean, some of us are still around, some of us are who knows where these
Yeah,
days, but
yeah,
it was a really good time, man. I think it was beneficial for almost everybody involved. But then it gets to the point to where you start to look around and you're like, this shit's getting a little crazy,
yeah. It
and
was.
everybody kind of drifted away for a little while after that.
Well, that place, man, McGregor invited me to go play with him, and I showed up. And I'm a pretty good outgoing person. I'm not kind of the type of person just walk into a place and stick my hand out and try to meet 60 people at one night. But I'm a person that I can go to a place even if by myself or with a friend or whatever, and if there's people around me, I can start talking to somebody or introduce myself and everything. But when I went there, I felt like that was my crowd, and like I say, I'd been at a couple of these other places, didn't work out. That was about my first 6 months
How
in
many
Nashville.
days had you been there before before you
Oh,
caught the porch on fire?
that's a whole nother. I don't know if I'm legally allowed to talk about
Allegedly. It couldn't have been many days at
that.
all. It couldn't have
No,
been many days.
it was a couple months, but
It's like 24 hours.
but
Oh, it's good times, man.
I went and played that place. I got uh, invited to play that place, and I went and I played, and I was like, "This is my crowd," and I just started, man.
Small town
I
throwdown.
started, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
small town throwdown. I just started walking up to people, guys, girls, people that I probably wouldn't associate myself with, and become their best friend that night. I've
Yeah,
never
because there
done
was
that.
literally probably 120 people out there.
Man, and we'd have bonfires. The bonfire wouldn't even
Yeah.
fit in this
I
room.
mean,
There's pictures.
literal mud wrestling and three-story
Yeah,
bonfires
the
and
flames. There's pictures, and you can see
yes.
people standing around. And they're this tall, and the flames are this tall.
Yeah,
Like,
but then it got to like there was like guns getting pulled, and
yeah,
there was a lot of just it always spirals out of control.
yeah. Well, I must say
Uh,
that I was intoxicated. I don't remember any of those things, so
yeah,
I can't
allegedly,
say. Yeah,
allegedly,
yeah, no
allegedly. We
doubt.
don't
I
say no
don't
names to
remember
protect
nothing.
the innocent. Um, you've always been a person that I respect for the fact that no matter what, like you're going to kind of be surrounded by music in one way or another. I mean, you're driving limos and working backstage at arena shows and on the set of big production TV shows. Tell me about being on the show Nashville. Like, what was the process with that like? Because I don't think a lot of people even understand what something like that would look like.
Man, that was pretty fun. That's when I knew for sure I wanted to be in Nashville. Um, I didn't start doing that until I did. I think till I moved back the second time.
Right.
So I moved to that house party deal, and I lived there for I don't know, maybe 8 7 8 months or 6 or something. And truck motor blew up. Moved back to West Tennessee, and then I started catching slack on like, oh, well, Nashville didn't work out for you. You didn't make this and that. Well, I knew I was going to go back, but I just had to. It was cheap to
Had to
live,
recuperate.
and I got another vehicle. I rebuilt my life and really prepared. And like we said, I wasn't focusing on music. I was spending more time partying, hanging out, and friends. I was getting distracted, and the Lord works in lots of ways, and I think that was a wake up. And and then I moved away. I came back. Eventually, I got to living with my buddy Eric Brewer, who I always looked up to, and it was a classmate, a roommate, and now a bandmate, and everything like that. So, but once I got to living there with him and felt comfortable, I had somebody that I knew and trusted and respected and cared for in Nashville. Had an idea to start building my life.
You
I
know what to
started,
expect the second
yeah.
time around too.
And then I started. I seen a ad or some type of something on Facebook about a casting company to do a movie. The first movie I was in, I think it was All Saints with John Corbett. I didn't even know who he was and things, but and a couple other actors. And he's married to a famous girl actor. They was all there, and I got to talk to him and everything like that. But
Right.
it's just like me and you talking, right?
Yeah.
So. And that's when I was like, man, like Nashville really is a thing. Like you can be around celebrities, you can do some cool stuff. But I also met another guy who was on set, and he wasn't bragging, but he hit it off and was around him for a couple of days. And he mentioned something about he's making about 1,500, 2,000 a week. And when I was working in factories and working my tail off to barely even clear a
$1,500 a month.
thousand, and I had one of the upper scale paying jobs there, so it was tough, and it was all factory work if you wanted a decent job. So I was like, man, how and where and what you doing? He was like, I play music, and that's kind of how I hit it off with him. He played music, and then he was doing the sets of the movie sets and doing security at the Bridgestone and some other arenas and things around Nashville, and doing rideshare, doing Uber and Lyft and things, and just combining all those. And I was like, I'm going to follow this guy's footsteps. I just believed in him. Um, and I started doing that. And he got me signed up with one security company. I wound up finding another one, so I could work almost all venues. And then and that was kind of scheduled at your own choice. But to answer your question about the movie thing, so that was cool. I did that, and then the shows of Nashville started opening up. They started season. I worked on season 5 and 6, around like Connie Britton, Hayden Panettiere, Charles Easton.
So where would you go to? Would you you just answered a casting call and just showed up, and did you have to
Yeah.
audition or?
No, a couple times I did when I did some different types of roles. I thought I was going to be like, I never wanted to be a movie star or nothing like that. Still
Right.
didn't. In a way, there's been some musicians like Johnny Depp, uh, um, Billy,
Billy Bob
Billy
Thornton?
Bob
Yeah.
Thornton, things like that, and they still are.
Yeah.
After they still are musicians now, and that's their job. They just don't make as much as they do doing music, movies. So that's why they do movies.
Right.
But I was meeting people and different things. I was meeting models, actors,
Well,
people who wanted to be dreamers and musicians and things like that.
where were some of the places that
Networking.
y'all were shooting at? Like the
They would
locations? Was it
a
like
lot of
just
times.
downtown stuff or?
Yeah, a lot of times. Well, they had a studio on Brick Church Pike that shot some in it, and then a lot of times it was on the different locations. They would use a lot of churches, which I thought was pretty cool. I don't know the pay or backstory. I think that they would probably give them a chunk to let them house us or hold us in holding, and then sometimes they would bus us to the location.
Yeah.
And and if you watch the show Nashville, I've been in that house that they shoot a lot in. I was on so many deals. Sometimes you didn't see my face. I was doing it so much, they was like, look, you got to be in the back because we're seeing your face too much. And there's been some times where towards season 6, in season 5, I was watching myself. It's crazy. We would film sometimes 2 or 3 days for 14, 16 hours a day. And in a way I didn't like it. Sometimes I got paid, worked 2 hours, got paid for 8. And around the smaller sets, when it was just a handful of people, you'd be around all the big actors and you could talk and hang out.
Right.
On some of the bigger concert scenes and things, they would use like 300 people in like the Opry. And they would do more like green screen type stuff, but they would have you sit all right here, and they'd change all places, put you right here. But you go back and look, it looked like the whole Opry's full,
Right.
and it wasn't like that. It's really cool. I wanted to learn camera tricks, and like we talked about
Yeah.
the documentary, I was really interested in behind the scenes. I kind of wanted to do.
Just a lot of exposure and experience, just
Yeah,
being around.
I looked into going to, I think it's called Argosy in Nashville for film production, but man, I almost could have went to a full scale college for what they wanted.
Yeah.
And then I got on set and I was like, man, I'm learning probably just much more than I would on set on at school. And so I got paid kind of to do that. And kind of always wanted to do music videos and different things for people, but it's kind of just an avenue I
I have a
haven't
theory
done.
that kind of what really happened to Nashville is the show Nashville. It's kind of like what Yellowstone done to Montana. It's like Nashville was a little big city, but then that show came out and it just kind of blew it up, man. Like since then, it just like started influxing immediately almost.
I think it had an influence. Still do Uber quite a bit to this day, and people talk about that show and
Right.
different things. And I bring up pictures of me and Hayden Panettiere and me and Charles Easton, things like that. I think it did have a little bit on it influence, on the city. But the crazy thing about that, I was actually on set the day that they canceled the show, man.
Really.
That was kind of a unique experience. I'll never forget that. Just to touch up on that is like we was doing a Bluebird scene, and they have a Bluebird. So I've actually been in the Bluebird without ever being in the Bluebird.
Oh,
They
have
have
a set.
inside the set, yeah, and they all the way down to the pictures that's
They
photographed and
recreated
everything.
it
Yeah,
completely as a
like
set.
they went and they did it full scale,
Wow.
even down to the scratchings on the tables and everything.
Oh shit.
But the first part of that day, the actors was in there. I remember for sure Charles Easton was in there and different things like this. And the film crew and some of these film crews was been on there as long as the actors and everything, you
Right.
know. So it's a really tight group. You can see the actors and film crew and then even some actors would get along. And even Charles Easton seen me out in Nashville at Top Golf and other place and called me out when playing with
Yeah.
his family to come over there and shake his hand and talk to me and gave up his swing for some other people to play so he could keep talking to me for a little bit. And I thought he's an amazing person. He would hang out with the uh, shoot with holding area,
Right.
background is what I guess I'm saying. A lot of the other bigger stars, they had their own holding section.
Oh, like the
That kind of
yeah
keep you separate. But Charles Easton would come
staging
over
area.
there.
He'd come
Yeah,
over and
yeah,
hang
yeah.
out with the extras and stuff.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
extras and things. Um, but on that set that day, that when we was in there, and man, it was all cool, good vibes and everything. You know, they'd film a scene and they yell cut and they cutting up and they're like, you know, and it's kind of fun to be in there. It's a cool
Yeah, man.
vibe and stuff. And then I was on there. And they kicked us all out, the extras, and sent us out into another holding area, which was just on the outside of the Bluebird building.
Mhm.
It's not a building inside the venue,
Yeah.
you know. So you're sitting there waiting, and like you don't, nobody knew, and then all of a sudden they started getting word about it. They might be canceling the show, but see, season 5 they killed off Connie Britt, and she was the main woman on the
Mhm.
show, and then they was trying to make it work, and I think their ratings tanked, or I don't know exactly,
Yeah.
but uh, you know, and then they all come out, and you could see the demeanor on the crew and everything. And they waited for about an hour before they called people in, and they were trying to film, and it just wasn't the same. And then the word had finally really gotten out, and you could see like the actors almost, I ain't gonna say crying, but you know,
Yeah.
you could see it. And after that, they wrapped it up, season 6, and I was starting to make headway, man.
That's about a run for a television show, though.
Yeah.
6 or 7 seasons.
Man, everything gets burned. You know, we're in a high, fast-paced media or TV that something new's always coming out. It's always better than this. They're, you know, upgrading and finding so much
Right.
things and people's always looking for something new, which is good and bad. But a lot of the stuff is here in your face now and gone
Oh yeah,
tomorrow.
you got to take advantage of it in the moment, man. Who's probably the most famous person you've ever met?
I don't know, man.
Because you've met a lot of. I mean, you've been around a lot of situations and a lot of scenarios to where you've been working security at the arena or maybe driving for people or whatever. I mean, you've met a ton of people.
Yeah, I mean,
You've had the real Nashville experience.
yeah, I did. And I've cut back a lot since had my little boy of trying to really put myself out there, trying to, you know, if you really put yourself out there in Nashville and start knowing places where they're hanging out with different things, you can
Hmm.
run into some,
Oh yeah,
you can run into some people. But doing security, I've talked to some really cool people. I've talked to Peter Frampton for about 15 minutes and had no idea that's who he was
right.
until the guitar tech walked up and asked him where he wanted his guitar. And I realized that Peter Frampton, and our conversation went into the gutter after that because I was tongue tied.
Yeah,
Because, you know, he wasn't, you know, he's a lot older and stuff, but he was really cool. And he was actually asking a lot about me and what brought me to Nashville. And I started saying music. I just thought he was some guy hanging out the backstage. I didn't even know he was doing this show. Um, but yeah, I've been around several actors and stuff, and a lot of people I didn't even know who they were until found out, you know, being on the casting and other people talking and sitting there Googling who they are
right.
after I just finished a shoot with them. And the security stuff too. And I walked Faith Hill out the back door. I don't know who you would really consider would be the most famous. There's a lot of people who's more influential to me than,
Yeah, I kind of maybe that's more what I'm getting at. Who is like
yeah.
someone that you were happy to have an experience with? Like it was
Um,
someone you looked up to personally.
Man, W.S. Holland was probably my biggest moment, just because I got to meet him, and then I got to go to his house, and then I started getting to where I could, and then I asked him to play theater with me to make that song, because my song talks about doing the recording deal, and then the second verse talks about going to Nashville, and third verse talks about playing live.
Right.
And I eventually worked, and I made that song come to a reality after it was nothing before that. It was just an
Right.
idea. And then I got to where I could call him. I still got his number in my phone. And I could call him I wouldn't blow him up and different things, but I would call him about 3 months, every 3 or 4 months or something. And,
Let's check in.
and just, man, how you doing, this and that. And yeah, we need to build up a show again next year, or do something, and just, um, but that's probably one of my most influential, and actors. I never really watched a whole lot of TV and movies and different things. I've met Billy Bob Thornton and stuff. He was probably the biggest actor, even though I've been around like Hayden Panettiere and Connie Britton and all these people. I don't, I
Yeah.
didn't, it wasn't like I looked up to them. It was pretty much like, it was cool. I talked to them, or I worked with them today. But also, and in Uber, there's been some experiences where, oh, I'll tell you who influenced. I did Top Golf too. I worked at Top Golf. I had a buddy that worked out there, and he knew I did Uber and things. He got me on there. Uh, I did kind of laid back, really work there. It was just transporting people from the parking lot to the venue.
Right.
But when they had bands, they've had several bands in there. But I finally got to meet the guys in Stone Temple Pilots, man. That
Okay.
was I
It's a huge influence for you.
that was a huge influence for me. That was their first album was just like,
Would that have been after Scott died?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was with their new artists, and Top Golf was a smaller venue. I don't know, they probably had 1,500 people there. I went to the show and stuff, but yeah, but it was still cool to
Yeah,
hang
for
out with
sure, man.
them guys. It was still the drummer and bass player, which is brothers, and the drummer, and I got to hang out with them in their green screen area, or green room area. But also, in a way, it was kind of cool and kind of bad. They was just starting their tour off and different things like that, and I was their band runner. Had to do everything that their manager needed me to. I was grocery shopping for these fools. I had to take their clothes to the laundromat. Had to pick them up, and then they was wearing them on stage. I was like, I
Dude,
touched them clothes, man. Like, not to be a
you
fan
never
girl or
cease to
something.
amaze
But
me, dude. You're willing to just take the risk and put yourself in any situation. Just
yeah,
fuck it, man. Like, I've always admired your level of fuck it and just being in there. With the shape of the music business that it's in now, you kind of have to be a hustler, man. I seen a video you reposted on TikTok, just this guy kind of breaking down like how a lot of musicians are giving it up, touring musicians, recording musicians, or whatever, because it's just they're not really finding any reason to stay in it. That
yeah,
video, first off, he was talking a little bit about how it's really hard on you to play 100 plus shows a year and
yeah,
to be on stage for 2 or 3 hours a night, and I understand some of that, but it's like, do you want this lifestyle or not?
yeah,
It is tough, and staying on stage and being in these smoke filled bars and, just exposed to different things that, certain personality types have a hard time saying no to and stuff like that. It can get tough, but nowadays it's almost like the music is has no value at all.
yeah,
It's the live performances, and it's basically what that guy was saying. It said the music is a promotional tool to get people in seats, when it used to be right the opposite. Because a stream, if you own 100% of a song, if you
yeah,
own the perfect scenario and you own every bit of a song, it's only generally 3/10 of a penny per stream.
yeah.
So you have to have 1,000 streams to make $3. You know,
Well,
a million streams is only $3,000.
yeah, something like that.
And a million streams is not all that hard to get, and $3,000 for that would be good. But if you figure you got $1,700 in recording the song,
Yeah,
or maybe you have a deal and you got co-writers, or you got someone that owns a percentage of your masters and stuff, it's just really hard for a musician to stick it out and make anything nowadays.
yeah. I could talk for hours on that, but I mean, in a song, you got 100% writer share and 100% songwriter. I mean, publishing,
Hmm.
and if you're down there writing in Nashville and different things, that starts getting all chopped up 3 or 4 different ways. And then you take a 0.0003 cents, and then you get a third of that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The best case scenario is you're drawing 3/10 of a penny per stream. If you're a songwriter and you're the sole songwriter, but you're not the one performing it, then you only get 15% of that 3/10 of a penny. Now, say you're a three-way songwriter, or the most cases nowadays it's a five-way or a seven-way. You know, it literally comes down to just dollars. You know.
And I can remember that slowly starting to change over because I did an interview with David Dunkley, who played with Tim McGraw for I think 17 years, and I did that interview I think in 2014,
Right.
and he was talking about how the difference is switching over then between, back in the day they used to just be weekend warriors and they would just go on the road and
Yeah.
it,
It was to
selling the
promote the
CD,
record.
and this even resorts to the songwriters as well. Back in the day, like if me and you had a song on Tim McGraw's album, back in the day, he was selling all these hard copies of records and CDs and tape sales uh, that we would get a chunk of. If we had a B-side cut, then
You
we
get
would
the
get a
same
chunk of
money
it
as the
because
hit.
that was getting us sold as a whole unit. And now with streams, if it's not their main top 2 or 3 songs that come off their album, a lot of people's not just listening to their whole album. They're listening to like top 100 or whatever, unless you're a die hard fan of that artist. So the songwriter, there's almost not even that great music and money in songwriting.
Yeah.
But yeah, and
The
that's
songwriters are the ones getting it the worst.
yeah,
Performing artists and stuff are still getting it bad, but it's like back when you were making physical records, you had one shot. And if your record didn't sell 100,000 copies, you were never going to make a record again unless you had private funding because recording was so expensive. Recording's expensive now, but it's way more accessible. And with personal, individual, independent distributing and, all this stuff, it's like you have somewhat of control of your own destiny, which back in the day, there were so many different variables. But it only took one back then. I hear guys talk about now, if you get a number one hit as a songwriter nowadays, you're right back to work on Monday. It's just because, and really, it's like Spotify gets a bad rap, but they solved the problem of piracy.
They saved it some.
And stealing music. The guys you're talking about, there was a period in time when they were solely relying on record sales, and then Napster come in and file sharing, and all that was gone. At least Spotify solved the problem of stolen music. It's better to get 3/10 of a penny than nothing, at all. But it's
sort of, but because a lot of people, if you could download it and then you go play it for your buddies, and there's some people that are diehard fans of people that wants to go and. Yeah, and you got streaming now, but the mix is so much, and I don't know for sure, but I'm sure these record companies got to dump in a whole lot more money just to get their artists to the top and different things like that.
Right.
And you can be a big time selling artist and still struggle in the way the business is set up, and being an independent artist is good and bad too. And
it's all about how smart you are, man, and the way you run your business.
Well, that's the thing too, and then doing music, man. Not only you got to learn an instrument and write 1,000 songs before you start getting some good material. Now, and then back in the day, you do that and you start going out and playing shows and developing a fan base, and that's kind of how it works and stuff. Well, there's lots of different ways, but that was the idea back in the day. And nowadays, man, to start out, a record company's not going to sign you and build you up like they used to.
Yeah, there's no artist development.
They're looking on TikTok. They don't even have to go out down on Broadway.
You have to have a package ready to present them. But a lot of people aren't interested in signing with a record label at all anyway. There's a certain level that you'll probably never be able to get over if you don't sign a major label record deal. There'll be always a certain level of cap. But if you run your business right and you have a strong fan base,
you can make a living.
Man.
Different ways, and like you say, but you got to be a talented artist, talented player, and different things. But then you got to be a social media manager. You got to be booking. You got to do all these things. Plus, and then if you want a family, or if you want a relationship, or you want other things that everybody else in life has, and to do all that, and you, if you're going to be on your own or make any money to be able to pay rent or survive, and you know, you
It's just a
and you
tough
can make
business,
money
man.
playing live and everything, but I mean,
Yeah, Billy Strings just brought in, I think they said he brought in $15.3 million to the city of Asheville,
yeah.
North Carolina.
I
With
did see that, but exactly what I'm saying. There's a new video out, or well, I've seen it surface a couple times just in the last week or two, where he's talking about, and it goes back to exactly what we're saying now and a little before, where it's like to be somebody, you got to do an
yeah.
artist. You got to be an artist now. You got and who's going to be an artist
The
plus
batch
this, and
just
then
gets so
plus
thin.
booking your own deals and doing the whole 9 yards, plus doing all that, and before you know it, there you got to have 7 or 8 different hats, and within each hat
Mhm.
you got to be able to fill that whole hat just because the booking whole thing is, you got to do your research, you got to negotiate, and now you got to do your band, you got to schedule. Like, there's so many things. Even after so many years, I get exhausted. I don't push my social media like I used to.
Right.
I don't.
Generally speaking, the people with the most creativity and artistic ability are also the ones that have the least amount of ability to just
Yeah.
be normal and like keep all that together.
And the guy asked Billy Strings, "How in the world did you get to where you're at or what you're doing?" He's like, you got to do all these things, wear all these different hats, and I'm just the stupid person to do it.
Right. Yeah,
And
you just have to be crazy enough to want it and just like you could never quit. You have to be the type of person that could never quit doing it because if you have the ability to give it up, you'll go find something else to do
that's
that's
a
more productive.
That's the thing about me too, is not that I've done a bunch of huge things, but I've done a lot of cool things, and there's so much cool things I've done I've even forgot about. Some of it's went through my mind since we've done this, but is I've got a lot of good buddies who's way more talented than I am, and they don't play the amount of shows that I do, or
Right.
they've never been on radio station, they've never done TV or interviews or played on news. And it's not because they can't.
Just
It's
you're
because I
willing to
don't know
put
if they're
yourself
scared.
out there.
Yeah, I don't know if they're scared to put themselves out there, or they don't know what it takes, or they don't. Yeah, what I'm saying is, I've always had business sense, but I've always been telling me no gives me
Yeah.
encouraged to see how long it's going to take to get a yes
Yeah,
from
that's what I was
somewhere
saying. I mean, you're
else.
always the type of person that's going to be like you're going to have something going on
And
in music.
I remember, I was doing the TV shows and everything like that, and I was doing it really hard for a couple years. And there would be people from back home, West Tennessee, messaging me, "Man, I love what you're doing," and everything like that. And I would die if I could meet so and so on this show. And I was like, "Man, they're begging for people to come. Sometimes they need 50 extra people, like they're short 50 people and everything, and this and that." And sometimes it'd be girls and guys, different things, but a lot of times it'd be girls, and they'd be like, "Well, I'm too big for all that, or I'm too ugly for all that." I don't. They
Yeah,
don't. They need people, and
yeah,
also, what would TV look like if just every single
yeah.
you wouldn't be able to relate to it, and if they
Right.
didn't have a bigger person
Yeah,
on
it
there,
takes
or an
all walks of
uglier
life,
person, or a
man.
different person of ethnicity or color and different things, that way it makes it relatable to
Yeah.
understand.
They need old people
Yeah,
actors for
yeah,
roles and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
What do you got planned over the next year or so, man? What you got coming up? You're getting
My
back in your recording process and stuff. You've been talking about you've been scoping out a couple of studios and stuff.
Yeah, I have found a studio in Nashville. I'm looking at working with. I'm tightening up some things from the last year. Um, I've been doing some home recording stuff, kind of getting prepared to cutting like demos at home, get it down to the metronome and the guitar, acoustic vocals, scratch stuff, everything like that, so I can kind of send it. I got some great brand members and things like that, but you know. The studio can be expensive. So my kind of goal, and before I did some recording in Nashville too, back in the day too. Um, but yeah, that's kind of my goal. At that time, I used a lot of people in Hendersonville. It was like played on the Grand Ole Opry and for Conway Twitty and Dolly Parton and a lot of big shots. The guy, Steve, I can't think of his last name, but he played. I'll never forget. I was at one of my recording sessions, and he came in and he played steel. He played with Randy Travis, a bunch of different people, and he played with steel. And he came in, set up. He could you could tell he's kind of in a hurry and stuff. He was really cool, dude. And then we hit record. We went through it. He banged it out, and they asked us like, anybody need to go back, and overdub and stuff like that. he's already unpacking his stuff. He's like, no, I'm good. He's like, I got a session, be a Kid Rock session. I got to be there, like, in like 30 minutes, and we was
Right.
in Hendersonville, so he like had to cut out. I mean, like this dude come in there like nailed it, and I had to go to Kid Rock next. And this is when I was just first getting into music and stuff. I was
Right.
like, man, this is crazy. And but what I'm getting at is my first album and things. That was I used very experienced people, but like I say, my influence is like more rock and different things like that, and trying to get these guys on that page. They was amazing artists in what I was hearing, and it came out a little more countryer and twangier than I wanted to. It was pretty cool though. I got the experience is worth everything. It got me bookings for ever since 2012. I've been using some of those same songs to get me booked and everything. So I don't know. That's what 13 years of that
Right.
material. I haven't. I recorded a handful of stuff for. I was going to release an album in 2014, and that's kind of a lot when I was back and forth to here to Nashville, and just things happened. And then 2018, my son was born, so that's been,
And then COVID and
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
The world's never been the same since.
A lot of things. I'm just now getting back to where, and at that time, I didn't have a band that I felt comfortable enough. And now I've had the same band members for 6 or 7 years. My drummer has been with me since the beginning. Like, I've been doing it like 17 years. He didn't come along until like a couple years into it, until I think he's been with me like 14 years or something. And, there's times I've used different drummers and things, but man, that's kind of been my solid crew the last few years. And finally, man, I encourage anybody, if you think you're good at being a musician, or this is what you want to do, go out and just go out there and embarrass yourself, learn lessons. And
That man, I've thought about this a lot. There's something about going ahead and doing things that you're maybe really not prepared to do, that it's like ripping that scab off.
yeah,
It's like it's terrible, terrifying at the time. It can be all this anxiety and stuff. But it's like if you just get through that,
yeah,
you're a different person. It's like you shed a little bit of that cocoon, and you're like and you got to do it, man. The guys that will not get out there and just you can't wait to get good before you start performing.
by the time you get good and get perfect, it's like there's no good perfect time to have a baby in your life.
Yeah.
There's no good perfect time to wait until you're at a certain point to get out there and hustle and do it. I've had to go out there and make a lot of mistakes, and now I'm pretty good at booking. I'm pretty good at performing live, interacting with the crowd, and working over that anxiety. Like, it's taken all this time for me to finally start getting comfortable enough to say that I've gotten
I've heard
pretty
people
good.
say that, like, they call Nashville a 10-year town, but really
Yeah.
it's just 10 years before you can kind of find your people.
Yeah,
But they say that as a performer and you're honing your craft, somewhere around the 16-year mark, you really start to become fluid with it. But a lot of people, that's about the same time that they start stopping caring. They're kind of burnt out on it. They
well, life happens, man, and you do it so long. If you've done music full time for all that time, man, you can get burnt. And there's even some of the biggest names get tired of burn out and stuff, and a lot of people want to be that big star, but
they don't understand heavy lies the crown.
hey, going back to the recording in Hendersonville, I had a good producer named Dick McVeigh. He's gone now, but he told me, he's like, what do you want to do? You want to be a performer and artist, or do you want to be a songwriter? At that time, like I said, I had music on the radio. I was performing, artist, and songwriting and everything. I was doing it all. And a lot of rock bands do everything like that. And a lot of the country artists, it's one or the other. And I spent a lot of time trying to be the man in my face and my name, trying to be the thing. And honestly, if I could go back and change it, I got over 3,000 songs sitting at home in a box, and I started getting carried away with trying to make the money and focusing on and I was comfortable with the original stuff, and I played a lot of originals, and every time we play a show, I'm playing 4 to 6 originals every set.
Right.
But I could put on a 6-hour original show if I needed to.
Right.
And but what I'm saying is, I told him, I was like, why can't I do it? I didn't understand, but kind of the goal, man. At that time, I wanted to be everything. Now that I know what I know now, man, if I could have changed it. I would have stuck in songwriting. I spent so much time trying to play Broadway downtown and opening them doors and developing my band and things. If I would have done that with songwriting, I would have probably been more successful, a lot more money, um, been more structured and set. And
If you can get in that clique,
and that's the thing too. There's no going to the songwriter community and say I played Broadway downtown or I played in a band all this time and I want to come in here and write with y'all.
in Nashville though, there's only about 300 positions for signed writers. There's about 300 publishing deals to be had in Nashville. You know, it's like trying to get on team with the Titans or like an NFL team or whatever.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is, that's what people are arguing. It's not, they're not necessarily arguing against Spotify. It's just they're arguing against the percentages.
Yeah.
Give the writers more of a percentage than 15%. The master holders get 85%. The writers, and that's only because the labels are usually the ones that hold the masters.
Yeah.
They're the ones that struck those deals.
Man, when you sign with a company, you're on the road. You have no say so of a lot of times, especially your first artist deal is going to be horrible. And that's when a lot, Garth Brooks, Shania Twain, all these people took bad deals at the first. Well, I mean, it gets you started, it gets you doing what you want to do, and it gets you facing the crowd and makes them who they are. And for the long run, they're millionaires. But you're also told what to do, where to go, your schedule.
What to sing, who to be, how to
I walked
dress.
away from a factory because I was in that. I've now not done many shows or anything hardly that I didn't want to do. I've been in some trucks and I've had some band members play with me that I didn't much care for, but I ran the show and they didn't play for me long.
Yeah.
And I've been happy. And my grandfather raised me, like I said, and he told me, "You be happy every day. You'll live a successful life. Look forward, and work towards trying to be happy. And there's going to be lots of things get you down for periods of times and everything." And when I lost him, it really took a toll on me. But in the long
I think
run,
that's a good spot, man, to be in.
and you got to take it a day at a time and things, and try to stay positive. The world will drag you down. But to say, you sign a deal, you start being around these people you have to be around all the time, every day. It's always a hurry up and wait game. You're on a bus, you're on a plane, you're on something all the time, and you're all the time gone. I went to Steven Wilson Jr.'s show the other day, and he's one of my favorite artists right now, and he's got a song called Hometown. And he's been in Nashville. I think he signed a first deal or different stuff in like 2016. He had another band, but he's really taken off as a solo artist right now. But he's playing. He had like a guitar ambience drone type sound going. And he said, he was introducing this song. He's amazing live, and before each song, he'll come out and jam for a few songs, and then before each song, as he gets into it, he tells a little story, a little something to introduce that song. And it's a really cool thing as as a consumer of his music. If you already know his song, he's got you guessing what he's going to play next. And there was a time where I knew. A lot of times I'd turn around to my buddy and tell him he's going to play this song. And a couple times he had me off, and I was like, "Oh, he got me."
Yeah.
But that was cool how he incorporated it. But he was going to play Hometown, and he started talking about he like being home. He's like, "I don't know what it's like to be home anymore," and it's like he uses a real low voice, and it's kind of almost dark. It reminds me, he's got that song 1994, but and you could tell a lot of his influences and different thing. I think everybody that grew up in the 80s and 90s is their deal, and their inspirations, and that was a big time deal. But that's what he's influenced by. But anyways, he was like, "I don't get to go home very much anymore," and they asked me, "Steven, when are you coming home?" and stuff. He's like, and he was pretty much like, and pretty much what he says, since I've done this music thing, I haven't seen home much.
Yeah.
And he's, that's kind of, and I try to still book, back home about every 2 to 4 months. And I'm thankful to be a songwriter and an artist, because going back home, sometimes I go back home without booking shows, and I'm there for 2 or 3 days. A lot of times I go hang out with a buddy or two. I can spend a few hours with them, and that's kind of all I can really see is them, or maybe me and my buddy would go to some other buddy's house, but I see a couple people. Now that I'm an artist and in the long run, I get to go back home, man. I do a show, man. I'm seeing 20 to 40 of my people, and I can look out in front of my crowd and be like, I start thanking people and start saying, so and so's here. I've known them since I was in junior high on a school bus. I rode school bus with them,
Right.
30 years ago. And so that's very meaningful to me, and I can see people. So that means a lot. That's really cool.
Music really brings folks together, man. I mean, it's a tough life, and people take advantage of it. They don't put a lot of value on it. It's like air. It's like you know, you don't really think about it until it's not there anymore.
Yeah.
Um, Man, I think we're probably getting a little long-winded. Shout out your socials and stuff, man, and let everybody know where to find you.
Mostly everything is Ryan Rooster Lee, Facebook, Instagram. Rooster Lee 88 is Snapchat.
Where's your?
I post a lot of my daily content on there.
If you want to watch crackhead videos in Nashville, go to Rooster's Snapchat.
You see some of my Uber footage. There's no telling what you're liable to see there. You see.
Where's your YouTube so people can check out
YouTube is Ryan Rooster Lee.
The interviews.
A lot of my interviews are on there. I've been meaning to chop it up and do different things, create the own Chase Your Dreams deal for that. But you got to scroll down because it was a few years ago.
Yeah.
But you can find all the interviews. There's lots of big time artists. Each interview talks about their life growing up, where they came, their success, and what knowledge you can get out of it, and things like that. You got Judy Rodman. She's the top vocal coach, but she also wrote One Way Ticket for Leanne Ryan, different things. She talks songwriting and vocal, and you can see how she works with me vocal and how she got me to do different things and techniques that people can learn from this. They can go to the W.S. Holland video, learn the backstory of W.S. Holland and how he become, with how he even got to know or work with Carl Perkins and Johnny Cash and all that. So you can do that. So Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, Ryan Rooster Lee, and Reverb Nation is my music site. That's where I post a lot of my shows and some live videos, and I think the Johnny Cash Tennessee Band song, maybe a couple more. I took some down.
Have you played Little Darling since we all played there together?
No, we did
I
that.
know that's fucking right. I know that's fucking right.
Yeah. We had a good time with that.
Hell yeah, man. Well, y'all check out Ryan Rooster Lee, man, and check out some of our other episodes we've got. We've had all kinds of people on here, Jack Fiddler and just a bunch so far. Justin Bolden was last week. We're still pushing that. Rooster will be dropping this next coming up Tuesday. You won't see, you'll already be seeing it by the time you hear this. But check out FIFO Media on the socials everywhere. Always out there doing some interesting stuff, staying involved in music. You got anything else, man, you want to say? Let them know about.
I got a million things, but I'm short.
Well, you have to come back. You be like a doc. Well, I'll do you like a doctor. Just check back with us in 6 months.
yeah, let's do that.
All right, guys.
We'll see the what happened in between now.
All right. Well, till next time, y'all take it easy. Peace.